Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of To The Point podcast. I'm Rachael Lyon, here as always with my co-host, Vince Spina. So excited we're continuing our conversation today with Gemma Moore, a renowned expert in pen testing and red teaming and co-founder of Cyberis, a cyber consultancy that creates personalized security solutions for global businesses. We tremendously enjoyed our part one conversation last week and can't wait to dive into part two today. So without further ado, let's get to the point.
Apologize for stepping on you, but I wanted to pull that a little bit when you're talking about on-premise, because earlier we asked the question, what kind of skills do you need to, be successful in this world of hacking and pen testing? And you had specifically said, you really have to understand networking, infrastructure, operating systems, databases, things like that. I used to run network and data centers in a previous life prior to getting into cyber. And in my days, most of all the tech and the data was sitting in branch offices or our own data centers. And then, over time now, a lot of customers there's no borders anymore, right? That you used to put perimeter borders around that tech and, just keep it secure from the inside. But that's all broken down now with things like cloud and remote working. And, we live in a borderless hybrid environment. How is your job and what you have to care about, and even customers, how's that changed as those situations have emerged? Cloud has come on, working from home now or in a coffee shop, all that. Like, how does that change what you think about?
Hugely, but also sometimes not as much as you might think. So there's cloud and there's cloud. Cloud means a lot of things. So cloud can mean sort of infrastructure as a service. So we're talking like the Amazon AWS EC2 stuff,
Yep.
The Azure virtual networks. So all of that stuff, it's kind of the same as if you had your internal network once you're in it. It's just it's in the cloud. It's not in your data center or your offices anymore. The bit that changes is the way that you have this control plane that's web-based, sort of publicly accessible normally, and you're changing from a situation normally where you're looking for lateral movement through vulnerabilities when you're trying to move through to that control plane. And you tend to be looking for lateral movement through phishing of individuals who have tokens who can access that environment. And it changes the game quite a lot with zero trust as well. So in a sort of zero trust end user device environment, we tend not to be looking to exploit vulnerabilities. There's still scenarios where getting malware on the device is what you want. But in that sort of zero trust environment, a lot of the adversary tactics are around phishing for credentials, doing adversary in the middle to bypass multi-factor authentication, then logging into, the Microsoft portal or the AWS front end using the credentials you've stolen, and carrying on from there without actually interacting with the endpoint device that's got your EDR system or whatever it is that's doing all the good detection. And it's interesting to work in that environment because it ends up being a sort of attack chain that's far more reliant on phishing and social engineering and all the ethical concerns that go with that if you're looking to exercise that in a red team scenario. And if you're looking at sort of how you do pen testing in that world, a lot of it becomes effectively audit. It's config audit, because what you're looking at is how are the control planes for these things configured, and what controls have you enabled, and what does that allow you to do in terms of, prevention, detection, response, and things like that. So, if you are looking at sort of Windows end user device environments, if you're in a Intune managed zero trust deployment, and everything is in Microsoft 365, and you've got your SharePoint and OneDrive, and that's what people are using, and Teams and things like that, you're really highly dependent on that user's login for protecting any of that information. And if you're not using phishing-resistant MFA for your users, and you're not enforcing conditional access policies that mean you have to use a well-controlled device that's enrolled in your system before you can access, SharePoint or OneDrive or email or any of those things, you're in danger because you're only one phishing attack away from someone having access to everything that's in Microsoft 365. And so it's interesting from the point of view of defense. It's interesting from the point of view of how it all ties together. But it's got its challenges for people that are trying to defend. Software as a service can be a bit of a an interesting challenge as well. So software as a service platforms, I mean, a lot of new businesses that are building functions, they don't have infrastructure as a service. You know, there's no systems there. What then a lot of them are doing is sort of tying together via various APIs a whole host of software as a service products into something that they are front-ending and branding. And these things are tied together via sort of APIs and requests, and there's all sorts of things going on in the background in integration. But what they don't have all the time is a lot of telemetry and a lot of logging. So there's a really big challenge because of the sort of shared responsibility model. You know, you're generally responsible for maintaining the security of the accounts, using things in terms of service, you know, making sure you're abiding by whatever your conditions are. But you're not responsible for the security of the platform. You're not responsible necessarily for, you know, keeping whatever the application is free of vulnerabilities. That's entirely someone else's responsibility. But when it comes to being able to detect an incident or respond to an incident, quite often, if you've got a load of those SaaS apps, you've got your hands tied. You can't respond in the way that you want. There's a really obvious example here. So if you've got single sign-on and you're using, I don't know, Okta, Microsoft 365, any kind of identity provider, and you've integrated your SaaS apps with that identity provider, you might think if you detect suspicious information in one of your accounts that's logged on, if you disable that account, that attacker's then logged out. It's not normally the case. Normally, when they verify their identity with the identity provider, they get issued a token that's got validity for a certain period of time, and that token is often valid until it expires. And that validity period can be, well, it can be months in some cases, but 24 hours is not unusual even for sort of high security SaaS apps. And then you've got a problem, because if you're a responder and you identify, let's say Vince's account's been compromised. Let's say a responder says, Vince is doing something weird, I think his account's been compromised, I'm going to disable that account, that's my containment step. If the adversary realizes that you've done that, and they probably will because they won't suddenly be able to log in again, they've got a token that's still valid for 24 hours in whatever the system is. They know they've been rumbled. They escalate and do whatever damage they were going to do, and often with a SaaS app, you don't have the ability to just terminate an active session. Sometimes you can't even work out who currently possesses of an active session, and that's the fundamentals of containment there that you can't necessarily do in all cases. So it's really challenging.
Wow. It's a lot to absorb. It's, is it a losing battle, Gemma? I mean, it just sounds like so much, and it's so overwhelming. Is that a bad thing to ask? But it's, I like to joke, when you talk about like infrastructure and things like that. Do we need to go back to basically the dark ages and just take everything offline? And, it all becomes manual again. I just wonder, because these vulnerabilities seem to be growing exponentially, but we're also getting more sophisticated and, aware of how to address them. But yeah, I'd be interested in your perspective there.
Rachel's the conspiracy theorist on the team here, Gemma. So.
I mean, I'm not saying I wouldn't want to go and, live in a cave somewhere and never be online, because I think sometimes that would be attractive. But, all of this cloud stuff and the interconnection, everything, it's been good for society, and it's been good for lots and lots of reasons. And, we have, I think, probably a more inclusive society in some ways when it comes to technology than we did before COVID, when everyone had to go remote. It caused a huge change in how everyone works. And, that is a good thing, I think, on balance. But yeah, there's all these little problems that open up. And I think that the big assumption that we've got in cybersecurity these days, and this is where, red teaming sort of comes into its own, is we have to assume that a compromise happens. And if you want to be secure, it's about getting the fundamentals in place, making sure you've got sort of the fundamental controls you need. And it's also about making sure you've got a detection and response process that helps you contain things before they get too damaging or, in too much trouble. And I think, on balance, yes, adversaries will probably win most of the time for a short period of time. But your job is always to sort of cut down their access, cut down their time, and minimize their damage through what I would call sort of fundamental cyber hygiene. You know, if you are, for example, if you're looking at the principle of least privilege, if you prevent people that don't need to have information having access to that information, if one of those users is compromised, they don't have access to the information, which means the adversary can't get it. And all that type of sort of fundamental cyber practice helps in that battle. And yeah, you know, people will still win. And like I say, I don't think we're ready for the whole deepfake AI tsunami that's coming for people. Yeah. But yeah, on the whole, I think defenders are getting better all the time. The controls that defenders have are getting better all the time. And it's pretty hard to get working malware onto a workstation these days where all the controls are in place and running as they should be. That's a win.
Yeah. Gemma, maybe let's pivot to red teaming, because we've brought that up quite a bit. First of all, do you know the reference Power Rangers? Do you know what a Power Ranger is?
I know what a Power Ranger is. I wish I
Okay,
did.
so I want to bring up, like, when I think about pen testing teams, there's several teams associated. I call pen testing teams the Power Rangers, because there's a red team, there's a black team, there's a blue team, there's a purple, yellow, green, white. Did I get them all? Gold. Okay. But when we were, researching you, and we did a brief and all that, you are specifically associated with red team, and but you have all these teams. Why is that? Like, what draws you to that componentry of this broader team?
Well, when I said earlier that you find something that really fascinates you, that's the bit that really fascinated me. So the red team, I mean, if people are confused about this nomenclature, the red team, we're the attackers. We're the ones that go after an objective, following the tactics, techniques, and procedures of adversaries. And we're typically going against the blue team, who are the responders. And it's this red versus blue thing that comes from, military reference right down the line. And then you've got when the red team and the blue team work together, which is a purple team, which makes sense if you did your colours at primary school. And then you've got things like the yellow team, who are the builders. And if you get the blue team, the responders, and the people that are in charge of the infrastructure, the yellow team together, that becomes an orange team, where they're talking to each other about how to defend. And when you get the red team talking to the people that built the systems, that can become, go on, guess.
Is this a secondary? Is this a primary color or a secondary
orange
color?
Team, green team, sorry. Yeah, it's all the colours.
Yeah.
And you get the white team that's over the whole thing. It's all a big thing. But red teaming, what I really love about red teaming is it goes back to what I said before about being able to teach people things they didn't know and explain why something is important. And it's really good for upskilling blue teams. So I love that part of it. After we do a red team, we run through a network. We often have a really in-depth debrief session with the blue team where we explain everything we did, why we did it, which direction we pivoted in, what technique we chose, why we chose it, things like this. And we teach the blue team things they didn't know before. That normally makes them better. When we get to sort of the point where we're intruding in a network and they are actively trying to oppose us, it's a really creative process getting around what the blue team is doing. And it's exciting, and it requires you to think, and it is different every time. So there's all this variability there that I love. And when it comes to making people more secure, if you're blue team, like I say, it's about minimizing damage, minimizing the window that an adversary can stay and reside in your environment, in your network. If your blue team is really good, and red teaming can help make your blue team better, you're in a better place. And nobody, I think I've said this before, nobody gets good at playing football on their own. You need someone to play against.
That's just, I think, based on what you said, I probably already know the answer, but you're focusing on the red team, and you're from outside of an enterprise. So you're an outside entity, and you were probably, you get hired by the business. When you're going on the offense, I would assume mostly the blue team, and that would be the internal side of it. When this is all going on and after the fact, how do you feel like, how does the blue team internally feel? Because quite frankly, this can be to a certain level a win-loss, and whatever you're doing well is highlighting deficiencies of the security team inside of a company. And I loved your metaphor on you don't learn football on your own. You need that, but it could paint them in a bad light. And I'm just wondering, do you get Christmas cards from the blue team, at the end of one of these, activities?
So I like to think when all's said and done and we've done the debrief and we're normally friends with the blue team at the end of it, because it's really important that the blue team are engaged in this process and see it as a positive experience. I'm a big believer in culture being a really positive influence on security overall. So the worst thing a company can have if they want a good cybersecurity environment is a blame culture. You don't blame people because things go wrong. Like, you don't blame people for clicking on phishing. You don't blame people for doing the wrong thing. You educate them and you explain and you try and make them better. Now, when it comes to that, if we have turned up, run through the network in 2 days, run away with the crown jewels and nobody's seen us, that's not necessarily a failing of the blue team themselves. Often it's, they don't have the right controls, or they don't have visibility of the area of the network that we were in, or the processes weren't written right. And often what we do with those debrief sessions is we actually turn it around and say, right, this is what we found, how can this help you to the blue team? And often what we find is that there is something they've been trying to tell people and nobody's believed them. And, they can't get investment in, controls that are monitoring activity on servers. They got the buy-in to put EDR on all the workstations, but nobody's giving them the license money to put it on all the servers, and they've been saying it for ages. And here we come, and we've done a bunch of stuff internally, and nobody's seen it because they literally haven't got the controls that see it. And we can help with that. Or they say, well, we tried, but we don't know anything about this technique. We want to be trained. And there's a message that goes, right, well, this is something you need to train your blue team to do. Or they say, well, we don't really have any processes written down. And then you've got a business case, a rational, backed up business case for making investments in these things, learning new things, doing some training and stuff like that. And it can be a really positive experience. But a lot of my job, I tend to work in the sort of red team management is what we call it area. This is where I'm translating between the techies now and people like the blue team and the white team, the gold team, the senior management level, what's going on, and interpreting things. And I think at the end of a red team, if I haven't left the responders feeling more empowered than when we started, we've probably done something wrong. Because, there's two ways it can go. If they catch us at every point, that's brilliant. That's a great news story, and we can give them a report that's full of good news.
Has that ever happened in your career? Ever?
It does. There are people that people that effectively respond really well, and sometimes they're teams that we work with for a number of years. So they may have been less mature when we started, but now they're really good. And in some cases, their blue team know us, and in some cases, their blue team can tell when we're operating that it is us.
Gemma's out there. We know she's out there.
Yeah, and they'll start with the banter, and that's fine. That's actually what you want. It's like, you caught us early, fine, great, well done. Crack on, get to the pub. Good game. But, on the other side, if they found nothing we've done, what we've got there is a really good argument for more investment in them, more training, more resources, more controls, everything that they probably wanted to do but couldn't get the business case to back it up. There's a way to spin it that's a win for the blue team every time. It's just about how you position it.
So I want to be mindful of time. This is so much fun, Vince. I could have this conversation all day with Gemma. But I'd love to ask you do you have a favorite hack? I mean, of all the years that you've been doing this, is there anything that kind of really stands out at you?
So there's so many, but the ones that stick in my mind tend to be the ones that had like a physical intrusion element to them, because they're often sort of funnier, I suppose, to engage in as the one with the physical intrusion, because they bring out the dressing up box normally. So the fancy dress box comes out, and things happen that don't normally happen. And there was a customer, and it was several years ago now, but there was a customer we did a pen test for, a sort of red team really. Where it was a physical access. Can you get into the building? Can you get domain admin? What can you do once you got into the building and got domain admin? Was pretty much the brief. It's here's the building, crack on. And we got some T-shirts printed up with fire extinguisher maintenance on. and we went in with a fire extinguisher. And we said to the people on reception, we're here to do fire extinguisher maintenance. I'm supposed to be meeting someone in the canteen, which was past the gates. And they're like, yeah, off you go, let you in.
Wow.
So it's, into the toilets, change into a suit. Out of the toilets, leave the fire extinguisher in the loos. And off we go to the main offices, plug in, because it's hot desking like most places are, and go make a cup of tea, have a piece of cake from the communal birthday cake there. It's fine. Help people. Someone was having trouble with a zip file, and help them out with a bit of tech support. Get access to their unlocked workstation that way. There were some physical workstations around where they were just sort of big desktops that didn't have encryption on, so we were able to compromise those and basically blank the admin password and straight in with local admin on those. At one point, our contact who knew us sort of walked in and saw us sitting at one of these desks and sort of wandered over and goes, "Oh, you're in then?" It's like, "Yeah, all right, fine," off he goes. But the fun thing was we found on the network, we found this door control system. And the door control system was part of the main network. And we'd escalated through, I think it was a sort of default database password we found. We'd escalated to local admin, got to domain admin. But then the question was, what are we doing with this access? And we found the door control system. And when we came in, we'd been given a visitor's card. And what we were able to do was reprogram the door control system. So that visitor's card gave us access to the secure room that was behind a big steel blast door. So we reprogrammed that, opened the door, walked in, took a selfie. Hey, we're in. Closed the door again, sent it to our contact. He's like, okay, that's not good. And another thing we were able to compromise was the video conferencing system that was in the boardroom. And what we did, it was vulnerable to a sort of remote exploit. It was one of these Windows embedded systems that never get patched. But what we were able to do was gain access to that device from the network and effectively get that conferencing device to phone us on a mobile phone. So we got the conferencing device to phone us, disconnected from the network, packed up, left, and we got this phone call active, bugging the boardroom from there.
Wow.
And then we had
you definitely didn't get Christmas cards from that company. I'm pretty sure.
So and that's it's stuff like that sticks with you as being that was a really, really fun experience for us.
It.
Really fun, because you don't get to do that stuff legally often. And that's sort of the thing. We've got license to do this stuff, and it's really fun. And you get arrested if you do that normally.
It sounds like a movie. I mean, a wonderful movie plot.
Mission Impossible or something.
I think it's one of those ones that is closest to sort of the Hollywood thing. A lot of it normally is 90% of sheer boredom. And I remember a time where I spent 3 days going through about 4,000 databases manually for various reasons, looking for a particular piece of data. That's not interesting until you find what you're looking for, and then suddenly it's the best dopamine rush ever.
Yeah. It's like a stakeout, I bet, right? Hours and hours and hours, but
90% really dull, methodical stuff, followed by 10% of sheer racing adrenaline as you head towards the finish line. It's I don't know, it's fun.
Well, you sold us. Being on a red team sounds fun.
Absolutely. I love it. It's just kind of one final thing. I was watching a thing about a security, I think similar thing that they were doing. And it's amazing that, someone that just walks in, right, and, maybe they tailgate to get in, wearing a suit, looks legit. This one company, the guy just started putting, oh, hey, I'm from tech support, kind of your point. I'm going to stick this USB in here, and we need to make some updates on your system. And people are like, yeah, sure, you look legit, and, you're not like a creepy, scary person. Go ahead. And I think about that sometimes, too, because you don't always know who the tech people are, and they roll up, and you're like, well, this is, card key protected. Surely they are who they say they are. So it's
we've done that too.
Good reminder. Yeah.
But it's see, the thing is, if you logically, if you sort of run down the whole you've got to challenge people if you don't know them thing, what happens when you challenge someone and say, I don't think you're supposed to be here, and they go, I am supposed to be here. and they start arguing with you, and they get nasty. Like there is a non-zero possibility of getting punched in the face in one of these interactions.
Yeah.
How many employees are willing to risk getting punched in the face for their companies?
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Not very many.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. Not up for that. Well, Gemma, thank you so much. This has been so much fun. I've really enjoyed it. So many insights and from your time doing this, and you make it sound like a fun, sexy kind of profession, to be honest with you.
I love it. I always have. So we're still doing it after 20 years. But yeah, thank you for having me. It's been really lovely to talk to both of you.
I flipped. I was pro blue team. I'm on the red team now. I'm like, it's
Yeah. Right away. All right. So to all of our listeners, thank you for joining us again this week for another awesome conversation. And Vince, you know, what are we going to say?
We're going to smash that like button. And please, in the comments, tell us future topics that you'd like to hear about.
Absolutely. Yes, we definitely want to hear from you. So until next time, everybody, stay safe.